The night Miriam Bonsu came home to an empty house, she stood in the doorway for a long moment and just listened. No keys dropping on the counter, no television murmuring in the den. Just the refrigerator humming and the furnace clicking on, and the particular silence of a house that has stopped pretending. She set her bag down on the kitchen floor and noticed the coffee mug she'd left on the counter that morning was exactly where she'd left it. Rinsed and turned upside down on the drying rack. She had done that herself, she remembered doing it. And somehow that small, ordinary thing made her chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. Her husband, Garrett Bonsu, was not home, he hadn't called. And Miriam, who managed 17 accountants at Halcyon Financial Group and could hold a balance sheet in her head like a map, stood in her own kitchen and could not account for where the past 4 years had gone. She was 38 years old. She had a corner office and a parking spot with her name on it, and a marriage that had begun, she now understood, to hollow itself out so slowly, she'd mistaken the sound for settling. The first time she suspected something, she didn't let herself know it. That was the honest version, the one she told herself much later, sitting across from her lawyer in a glass-walled office in downtown Ottawa. At the time, she'd filed it differently. Garrett had been distracted. Garrett had been stressed. The firm he co-owned with his business partner, Dex, had a difficult quarter. There were reasons, there were always reasons, and Miriam, who had spent her career building airtight explanations for complicated numbers, was very good at constructing them in her personal life too. She was 40 minutes into her commute home on a Thursday when her phone buzzed with a notification from their joint account. A charge at Le Baccara. Not the restaurant, the hotel suite wing. $312. She sat with that number for the rest of the train ride. They had stayed at Le Baccara once for their third anniversary. She remembered the thread count of the sheets and the way the city looked from the window, and how Garrett had ordered room service at midnight and fed her fries off the plate because she'd said she wasn't hungry and then changed her mind. She didn't call him. She got off at her stop, walked the 6 minutes to their house, and took the long way, through the park, which added 11 minutes she didn't need to add. She needed the cold. It was March in Ottawa, and the cold was clarifying in the way that grief sometimes is. Garrett was home when she arrived. He was on the couch watching hockey, and there was a beer on the coffee table, and he looked up and smiled. The easy, uncomplicated smile she had married, and said, "Hey, you're late. There's leftover pasta if you want." She wanted to believe him. She did believe him. She chose to believe him, which is a different thing entirely, and the distinction would matter later. His name was Garrett Bonsu, but he had always gone by just Garrett, which was his father's middle name. And when they'd met at a mutual friend's dinner party 11 years ago, he had been the kind of man who listened more than he talked, which she had found remarkable. Most people, in her experience, did not actually listen. They waited. He was a structural engineer. He designed buildings that held weight, that distributed load evenly, that stood in all weather. She had found that meaningful, once. The woman's name she didn't learn until much later. When she did, it landed less like a revelation and more like a confirmation of something her body had already understood. Her name was Petra, not that it mattered to the story, or to Miriam, or to the outcome. What mattered was simpler and more damaging. Garrett had been spending money, not frivolously. Not in a way that showed up, obviously. He had been careful, which meant he had thought about it, which meant it had been going on long enough to require a system. Miriam found the system in February of the following year, almost 11 months after the hotel charge she had chosen not to examine. She found it because she was a forensic accountant by training, and because she was reviewing their tax documents, and because certain numbers, once you know how to read them, simply do not lie. There were transfers. Small ones, 200 here, 350 there, moving from their shared investment account to a secondary account she hadn't known existed. The account was in Garrett's name only. It had been opened 18 months ago. She sat at the kitchen table with the tax documents spread in front of her, and she did not cry. She calculated. She went back through 2 years of statements, and she built a spreadsheet. And when she was finished, she had a very clear picture of what had been happening. And the picture was this. Garrett had been systematically moving approximately $1,400 a month out of their shared assets, and the total over 22 months, was just over $30,000. $30,000. She closed the laptop. She made herself a cup of tea. She sat with the mug in both hands and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard, where the snow was still hard and white and undisturbed. And she thought very clearly, he has been planning this. Not the affair, the leaving. She called no one for 3 days. This was not weakness. This was Miriam understanding that once you tell someone, the thing becomes real in a different way, and she needed those 3 days to decide what kind of real she was going to make it. She went to work. She reviewed quarterly projections. She had lunch with a colleague named Beverly, who talked about her renovation, and Miriam listened and asked the right questions, and ate half her sandwich and drove home in the dark, and sat in the driveway for 6 minutes before going inside. On the 4th day, she called her older sister, Adaze. Adaze was 51 and lived in Mississauga and had been divorced for 9 years, and had exactly 0 patience for careful language when the situation did not require it. Miriam laid out the facts, the account, the dates, the amount. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Adaze said, "How long have you known?" 3 days, officially and unofficially. Miriam looked at the refrigerator, at the little magnet they'd brought back from Jasper, a cartoon bear holding a fish. She'd bought it because it made Garrett laugh in the gift shop, and his laugh, at the time, had made her feel like she'd done something right. "Maybe longer than that," Adaze said. "Okay, here's what you're going to do." What Miriam did over the next 6 weeks was nothing that looked like anything. She went to work. She came home. She made dinner twice a week, which was their arrangement, and she asked about his projects, and he told her about load-bearing walls, and she listened, and somewhere underneath the listening she was building her own structure, quietly, in a way that did not announce itself. She found a lawyer, not someone referred by a mutual friend. She was careful about that. She found Constance Yaboa on the recommendation of a colleague in the legal sector who didn't know Garrett, had never met Garrett, had no reason to mention anything to anyone. Constance had short natural hair and an expression of complete composure, and when Miriam spread the spreadsheet across her desk, Constance looked at it for a long time without speaking. "You did this yourself?" she asked finally. "It's what I do," Miriam said. Constance nodded slowly. "This is very thorough. I wanted to be sure before I came to you. Most people aren't this sure when they come to me." Constance looked up. "That's going to help." What Constance explained, in the language of family law and asset division, was what Miriam had already intuited in the language of numbers. The transfers were not, on their own, grounds for criminal charges, but they were very clear evidence of dissipation of marital assets, which was something a judge would take seriously. The secondary account, the pattern of transfers, the timeline, all of it painted a picture. The picture would be useful. "What do you want?" Constance asked. "Not what do you need, not what are you entitled to. What do you want?" Miriam thought about it genuinely. She thought about the house, which she had loved, before she had stopped being able to look at it without doing math. She thought about the investment accounts they had built together over 12 years of double incomes and deferred vacations and careful choices. She thought about the bear magnet on the refrigerator. "I want what's mine," she said. "I want the record to show what he did, and I want to be done." Constance said, "I can help with all 3. The night Miriam finally said something to Garrett was a Tuesday in April. She had chosen Tuesday deliberately, not a Friday, which would have given him the weekend to react. Not a Monday, which was too charged with the beginning of things. Tuesday was neutral. Tuesday was the middle. He came home from work at 6:40, and she was at the kitchen table, with the laptop open, and when he leaned down to kiss her cheek she let him because she was not cruel, and because she had needed to see whether she would feel anything, and she did. Not love, not anger, but something quieter and sadder, like standing at the edge of a place you used to know. She turned the laptop toward him. He looked at the spreadsheet for what felt like a very long time. The numbers were clear. She had labeled everything: dates, amounts, account numbers. She had been thorough in the way she was always thorough. "Miriam," he said. His voice had the texture of a man looking for the exit. "Sit down," she said. "Please." He sat. He did not look at her directly, which told her everything the spreadsheet hadn't. She asked him, calmly, "How long?" He told her 14 months, the honest version, which she appreciated more than she expected to. She asked him if he intended to leave. He looked at the table and said he didn't know, which was the most honest thing he had said in 14 months, and also completely useless to her. She told him that she had already spoken with a lawyer. She told him that the transfers would be addressed in the settlement. She told him carefully what Constance had said about dissipation of marital assets. He looked up then. "You went to a lawyer," he said. "Not a question. 6 weeks ago," she said. Something moved across his face. Not guilt, she thought, but the specific discomfort of realizing you have underestimated someone. She had seen it on the faces of clients who came to meetings unprepared. She recognized it. "I thought," he started. "I know what you thought," she said, and she wasn't unkind about it. She just meant it. He moved out in May. He took the things he'd come with, more or less, and some things they'd acquired together that she didn't want to fight about. He left the kitchen table because it had been her grandmother's. He left the jasper magnet, which she found the morning after he moved out, still on the refrigerator, and she stood there looking at it for a long moment before she put it in the drawer. Not in the garbage, in the drawer. She was honest with herself about the difference. The settlement took 4 months, and it was not, in the end, a battle. Constance had built a thorough case, and Garrett's lawyer was pragmatic, and Garrett himself, Miriam suspected, understood that the spreadsheet was not a thing you argued with. The $30,000 was returned to the marital pool and divided accordingly. The house was appraised, and she bought out his portion. The investment accounts were split. She did not cry in any of the meetings. She cried twice at home. Once in August, when she found one of his old hoodies in the hall closet, and once in September, for no reason she could identify, just a Tuesday afternoon in the kitchen, with the light going flat outside and the silence sitting with her. She let herself have the 2 times. Then she got up and made dinner. The thing about working in finance is that you understand in your bones that every number tells a story, and the story always goes back further than the number. Miriam had learned this early. Her father, Dr. Emmanuel O.C. Bonsu, had come to Canada from Accra in 1981 with $1,100 in a money belt and a degree that took 6 years to get recognized, and he had built a life by understanding precisely the value of everything he had. He had passed that understanding to his daughters like a piece of furniture, solid and useful and not particularly comfortable. She had thought for a while that Garrett understood this too. He was an engineer. He dealt in materials with known properties, in load calculations that did not lie. She had thought they were speaking the same language. What she hadn't understood, what she only understood later, sitting across from Constance for the last time, signing the final documents, was that the language of materials and the language of money were not actually the same language. Garrett understood how much weight a beam could hold. He did not understand, or had not wanted to understand, that a marriage is also a structure, and that structures fail when you quietly move the load somewhere else and hope no one notices. Constance slid the last page across the desk. Miriam signed it. "How are you feeling?" Constance asked, and it was a genuine question, not a professional one. Miriam put down the pen. She looked out the window at the October street, the trees stripped back, the light very clear and cold the way Ottawa light gets in autumn. Like the city is finally just being honest about what it is. "Like someone who just finished a very long audit," she said. Constance smiled. "Good. That means you're clear." She kept the house. She relearned the silence of it, which was different from the silence she'd stood in that first night. Less like absence, more like space. She moved her desk into the room Garrett had used as his home office, and she opened the window when she worked, because she liked the cold coming in, and she liked the particular quality of Saturday mornings in her own house, which belonged to no one's schedule but hers. Adaizi visited in November and they drank wine, and Adaizi did not say "I told you so" even once, which was a form of love Miriam had always appreciated. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Miriam said, late in the evening, the wine half finished. "What?" "He thought I wouldn't look." She said it without bitterness, just observation. 11 years, and he thought I wouldn't look at the numbers. Adaiz turned her glass in her hand. "Did that surprise you? That he underestimated you?" Miriam considered it honestly. Outside, the first serious snow of the season was coming down, heavy and quiet, covering everything that had happened in the year with something clean. "No," she said finally. That's the part that didn't surprise me at all. She refilled their glasses. The snow kept falling. The house held all its weight, evenly distributed, every beam doing exactly what it was designed to do. She had built it to last. The next part she would build for herself.